over, baby. Stop it. That's not what I've asked you. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Hopefully it won't fall over. You're gonna fall over, aren't you? I know you. I know you of old. Camera. Okay. And we should be set. You are on stream.
I'm on stream. Hi, stream.
Okay, but it's live.
I've always wanted to be a YouTube streamer.
Okay, now I want you to walk away. Is this Jen's back? Okay. All right.
Hey Mary, how's it going? This is my friend Mary. This is my friend Mary. She's a phone.
It's also weird because my boyfriend is never working. He's like a brother since like 2 years ago. So I like you know, feel like we never brothers. And it's weird. I'm like, they're it's crazy.
It was good. With my parents. I wish I could. Like, my oh, this is my friend Jerry.
Never mind. I'm not gonna do that
No, I know.
The person that their birthday
Vegas, San Diego, and Mexico.
Hey, anyone who's here for 099, there's a sign-up sheet in the back now. So make sure you sign in before or after.
Now we can start.
Don't know how next time.
No, I don't want I get it. So 6:30 at the. At least to drop off the books. Very
Yeah, okay, that's what I was thinking.
I like what I do day to day, like it's basically just teaching and meeting with students one-on-one. Yeah, it's like there was a team I think like they Yeah, I was talking to her. Either way,
I love doing that so much. I learned it from a person who was teaching like 4, 5, and K. It's like eyes on my nose, and everyone's all the little kids look so quiet, but it actually works even better with adults. Welcome to the very first opening event of Winter Week 2022. Yay! So it's always so gratifying once the event starts. We're in the mix, we're ready to go, we're excited. We're just putting folders together for events. Thanks to Megan and Michael and Jen for their help getting everything going today. We've had a great process of getting Winter Week planned and starting to get things executed. And I really want to thank Felicia Cameron, my Winter Week coordinator this year, for making sure that people were getting contacted, everything was getting handled. I don't like talking on the phone. So whenever there's a phone test, I'm like, Felicia, help me. So it's always wonderful to have the experience of having a grad assist with that and learning more about arts administration and management and so on. So thank you very much, Felicia, for that. I also want to thank the Creative Writing Program, of course, for always allowing us to dovetail our events with the reading series. It's really, really important that we are able to sponsor a faculty reading every year, make sure that we have a voice for our faculty too, and that you get to hear from our faculty. We are exceptionally glad tonight to be able to introduce our new faculty member. It's so important for me also to acknowledge the support of the Ohio Arts Council. We apply for a grant every year to support both Winter Read and magazine, Mid-American Review. It's really crucial funding for us, as it is for arts organizations all over Ohio. Last year, the Ohio arts budget actually increased for the first time in a really long time. It was such a relief. Many organizations received relief for damage that they took during the pandemic when they weren't able to have in-person events and so on. So Ohio Arts Council, throw your support behind them as much as you can, because they have really been a lifesaver for all of us in the arts. I also want to just say thank you to the grad students and our interns. Winter Week is a huge event for our MFA students in particular, who are all doing presentations, and many for the first time at a big conference. And it's an amazing experience. It happened to me too. The very first Winter Week was my very first year as a grad student. This is now the 22nd Winter Week. So a very long time, long and storied pathway. But we're still doing some things that are very similar. So just a quick rundown of the schedule. Tomorrow we open up at 2:30 in the education building with tea and coffee with our editors. We also will be starting the check-in process, and we also will do on-site registration. So if you're not registered and you just want to come in at the door, you absolutely are welcome to do so. We will have a session, workshop session at 4 o'clock. alumni and MFA reception at the Union at 6 o'clock, and then at 7 o'clock and 3:03 education is Tales of Initiative, our Dungeons and Dragons event. And I know some of you in here are signed up for that, so we're looking forward to seeing you there. It's going to be awesome. And then on Saturday, we start up at 9:30. The book fair of regional presses and programs starts at 9:30 in the education building, and we will also be starting our sessions at that time. Check-in will start around 9 a.m. Hopefully we'll be able to get into the building. I'm always a little cautious about that. Like, is someone going to remember to let us in? We don't want writers like banging on the glass walls all the way around the education building. Maybe we'll do that anyway. It'll be an installation. So the sessions will run until 5:15. At 1:15, in 1:15 education is our reading by our featured guests who are also alums, Remy Recchia and Rosanna Alice Boswell Recchia. I chose all names this year. Did not do that on purpose, but it's going to screw me up excessively. And then our open mic event is at Howard's downtown, and we'll have some kebab there. That'll run about 6 o'clock to 8:30 or 9 o'clock, somewhere in there. So you're welcome at all festival events. This is an event that is open to you and open to the public. It is free. All events are free. So please make a priority to instill some generative work, some creative work in your life. And thank you so much for being here as we celebrate our first event and our first reader, who will be introduced by Lawrence Coates.
Hello and welcome to Winter Wheat, and it's my pleasure to introduce our newest colleague to Bowling State University's Creative Writing Program, Reema Rajbanshi. Teacher, writer, scholar, Reema's interests, talents, and accomplishments are extensive. She comes to Bowling Green with an MA in Creative Writing from UC Davis and a PhD from UC San Diego, having taught previously at Trinity College and Haverford. Among the topics she's interested in, both in her teaching and her writing, are climate fiction and also issues of race, caste, and indigeneity. The study of literature that addresses climate change, our changing climate, one of the most important issues facing the world, is an invaluable addition to our university. And bringing a global perspective to the study of race, caste, and indigeneity, decentering the North American context, will similarly add rich new perspectives to our program and for our students. In her own creative work, Reema is interested in semi-experimental texts that explore girlhood, cross genres, and reimagine the social. Her work has been nominated for the Pushcart Prize and has appeared in Confrontation, Southwest Review, Chicago Quarterly Review, and other journals. In 2018, she won the Women's Prose Prize from Red Hen Press, which led to the 2020 publication of her first book, Sugar Smoke Song, which is for sale in the back. The book, a linked story collection, takes place across the globe, in New York, California, Brazil, India. It explores the passions and secrets of young women who live in the contemporary world and also contend with the histories and traditions of their past and their communities, and foreground issues of sexuality, gender violence, and Asian Black relations. It was called Sensuous and Surprising by Ford Reviews and was highlighted as an indie book by Frolic. In her judge's citation, the writer Lydia Yuknovich said, "The fire and guts of this material made a helix with the poets and heart of the story. I was left breathless several times. The writer's on the cusp of inventing a signature language meant for telling this particular story." So, here to leave us breathless, please join me in welcoming Reema Rajbanshi. Just in case.
Thanks for that introduction, Lawrence. I hope I can live up to it a little bit today. And thank you, Abby, and everybody who worked so hard to put Winter Week together, and for this very generous invitation to read to open the festival here at BGSU. So I'm going to begin Just very quickly, I'm not going to do too many introductory contextualizations, but I do want to sort of frame my reading tonight, which will go up to 45 minutes, and then I'll open for a Q&A by saying that, I'll be reading from 3 pieces, excerpts from my book, and then I'll close out with new material from my current nonfiction project, which is the travel memoir. And I'll begin with, by saying I built the book in 2 parts. So that was my particular journey, and I know that some of you or many of you are thinking of building a book or are building a book right now, and no journey is the same. My journey was definitely very unpredictable. One part of the book was written during my master's thesis experience, so you'll see that that's a little bit more traditional in style. So I'll read from one of those stories, and then the last 2 stories will be from my post-MA years when I was a working artist. I was in the PhD program, and I started experimenting a lot more. So I'll start off with the longest excerpt, which is traditional. This is from Lafar's Beautiful Daughter. And I want to open up by saying about this piece that, by the time that I published this piece, I was a little bit more confident as a writer. I hadn't been in my MA program. I was one of the youngest. I was very shy. Nobody expected me to publish a book. So much for low expectations. That did end up happening after several years. And one of the things that I did with this story, I had smaller pieces published in online journals and then eventually print publications by just submitting to contests, was I sent this out to a couple of bigger journals. And the New Yorker wrote back. So the editor did give me personal feedback on this one. They didn't end up taking it, but it got picked up by another journal that, placed in their contest. And so, I think you just have to believe in yourself and send things out, and it will find a home. So I'll read from the middle here. My parents waited till the morning of the final to give me my glasses. Bulletproof squares I finally slipped on in some nameless park. Suddenly, the penguins plucking classical on the lawn turned into lean Jews cradling violas. The pointillist mist cleared into bow-tied judges and hatted mothers gliding under a striped tent. Still, I could feel the weight of the sinking sun and sweated into the darkest corner to stuff my mouth. All us immigrant kids had congregated to slog down sparkling cider and gorge on chocolate-covered strawberries and to watch the border of the tent. Dandelions and dogwoods had spilt gold all around us, on streets sizzling with summertime skirts, beneath cars blaring hip-hop poetics. Every block simmered with oye amor, boiled over with dark bodies, gleaming for beach, a resurrection we rushed out yearly to witness. Though this once we couldn't trespass past the white tent spikes, we were made up too nice, combed and suited, supposedly frothing to speak, to tell our stories for 10 minutes on a wood podium. 3 of us were left, the Jamaican spider boy, me the African princess Indian, and then there was Cassandra. Cassandra Pashupati, an Energizer bunny of a 12-year-old who'd won the city title 2 years straight. Like her namesake, this high-class storyteller was a hard-to-believe legend. Despite her melodramatic gesturing, her tic that made her push up her glasses, her choked sobs when some other story pushed hers to second, she'd always pulled through to the final. Her story alone won in the end. No wonder we worried, until, of course, we met the Blessed One herself. And then we were paralyzed with fear, with awe, with envy. When she entered the tent dressed in a flouncy white dress that was almost a Sunday school outfit, it was like running into my stunt double, my better twin. Not only was Cassandra Indian, she was more put together, more confident than I'd ever be. Flashes went off as she trotted, her better side angled to the audience to her front row seat, a posse of mother, father, sisters, no cousins galore trailing her. She patted her slick black bob, x-ray scoped me and the Jamaican, licked one forefinger before flicking each page of Thumbelina. Already I could hear my mother if she won. You should have practiced more. Why didn't you act it out? Don't you know what charm means? But if someone had asked me, I would have said, I liked my understated, precise manners. Cassandra was a parody, like, say, Dolly Parton. Someone might have said that you love Dolly, and Cassandra seduces her audience, even reluctant little you. And I'd admit, when Cassandra marched up front, clasped her hands behind her back, flash turned on like a high-voltage billboard in Times Square, I paid attention to her toothy grin, wide fluttering eyes, swiveling head that met every face in the room. You, yeah, I'm telling this story to you. But I would have added, her voice, somewhere between a bird's rich trill and a tree frog's plaintive croak, sounded forced to me, as if she too were storytelling for her life. I'll admit also, I could have beat Cassandra, who stuttered twice, mixed the toad and the mole, called Thumbelina Tumbelina. Hell, she read the story of a homeless girl bandied between animals who tried to marry her, as if orphanhood were bursting with positive energy. But I knew where the poetry lay, in Thumbelina's silences, the broken-winged swallow she tended in secret, the strangers who helped her as she floated through landscapes, looking for home. I could have even beat the Jamaican, who read as perfectly as a robot, the life spooked out of him by the crowd. Not a single laugh for all those great trickster lines. But I lost. From stage, I crystal balled a dozen blemishes on 100 faces, my parents' coal eyes and Mrs. Chapman's whitened smile looming up front. Could they see me as I saw them? All those afternoons I had read fairy tales, I had not noticed the red rims of my father's eyes, the sag of my mother's pretty cheeks, the way my teacher's left hand clutched her throat as if she too wanted to speak but couldn't. Instead of asking what had led them to their expressions under this tent, I had memorized a royal savannah that belonged to no one I knew. A judge thumped his pencil, but I looked past his back row to the street beyond the tent, beyond its row of 12 saplings to the silhouette of road against brick against gloaming sky, a cobweb more vast and complicated than any Anansi might spin. I did not know what to call these roads that had led to this gussied-up park, but I saw how they ran past the tallest buildings, round the dingiest lots, spiking right into the red sun before it blazed out. I guessed at all the suns these roads would cross on the way to how many towns, and what strange moons they, like Manyara, would witness. All I had to do to name streets that had always run by me was walk them. But first business first, I made up a story right there and then. The fabulous sequel to Thumbelina, I said. Her Adventures Part 2. I don't remember what the hell I babbled, just the sounds as I stared at those faraway streets, people flipping through programs that gave a different title, the Jamaican's name, Robert Jules, when he won, my parents hissing at each other in the car, and Mrs. Chapman, who was quiet in the back seat, holding me, her heart going pit-pat-pit into my face. Tonight's gonna be fun, Brooke cries, running out in her punk rock chick undies, while I set a bag of old books down in Astor's kitchen. It's a play date once Astor leaves, me cutting up Brooke's salmon, munching seaweed she feeds me, rubbing her down with lavender oil. Then the ritual, spooning under a quilt embroidered with her Indian name, Shakti, reading into her ear the way my mother read into mine. How Nyasha and Manyara vied for a prince, how the Wawalak sisters were reborn from a serpent, how Grimm sisters were doomed to spill things whenever they spoke. One sister, flowers, and the other, frogs. I like frogs, Brooke says, squirming round to assess me with her brown button eyes. Do you? I don't know if I like them more than flowers, I say. Underwater, she says, they look like jewelry. She wants Thumbelina last, insisting the pips we travel to stranger lands, visit weirder critters, hide in more exotic orchids. For every detail I miss, she claps my mouth, You forgot. Till she drools off in her curls, and Aster eases into the bedroom to find my mouth clamped. False labor, she laughs, rubber banding time and sage into my purse. When I ask about her on and off dates with her off-the-rocker husband, she folds her hands. I suddenly realized my daughter is my true love. Is this true? I wonder, as I bike about Aster's woodsy grounds, about mothers pushing daughters on swings, fathers catching sons off monkey bars, geese waddling after each other across grass. And I hear Brooks question, where's the mama, for every story that had none? Immaculate male conception, I wanted to tell the midwife's kid. But what do I know of life's miracle passages? Why my Tibetan friend points to the gap in her 7-year-old's grin and jokes, the gate of India. Why my Assamese friend named her son Nilakontha after a god who, having drunk poison, got a blue throat but wouldn't die. Why my Kannada friend, a widow who calls her baby and dog her traveling circus, taught them, stop, good girl, I want. Or why my mother called this week to ask about colors neither of us really see. She and my father are draping silk about the pillars of the altar since Hannah wants a royal look. When I say I hadn't heard but like purple, she cries softly, as if afraid someone might hear her. What happened? She says. I couldn't answer that, I say, and she sobs, in hiccups, the way I do, nostrils probably pinched, the way mine get. This is a house of calm, she says, slipping into Ochomia the way I will when I weep behind knolls. Nights she cannot sleep, she says she watches videos of Hannah and me, dancing, singing, sparring. My face flushes, but I say nothing, and my mother switches to other things. How many times the altar fell, leaning too far left, too far right, how they found it in shambles each morning. Ajit Haki said, finally, she says, you know your Dita, he doesn't give up. I call my father as I yank up shriveled herbs, flowers, sticks, but his phone rings without end. He still can't set up a voice box. So I measure the broken fence encircling my upturned soil. When I first stepped through, I planned to set the jagged rail straight, buy a latch for the ghetto string. I'd learn all this when my father visited, so no matter where I lived, I'd be safe. But my folks came once the first year and hid from sun in my bedroom, then spent this year erecting planks in their living room, marking each sturdy post with numbers and arrows, a blueprint for the first house my sister and her husband will stand in. My phone rings just as owls rustle onto my lone lemon tree. Moon-faced creatures with startling eyes that see sideways, they've nested outside my window, dozing, peering, blinking until night when they hunt. Ooh, ooh, they call as my phone trills on. I haven't set up a voice box either, and I imagine my father, scarfed, pressing against wind that slows him down Leidig, where he walks daily to outrun his fate. I imagine the question he'll toss, the words I'll toss back. If I come, where will I stay? So the next story that I'm going to read from is one of the other half of the book that I built post MA, and this you can see that I get more experimental here. This is the longest story in the collection called The Stars of Bollywood House. And part of what I was experimenting with here was writing from an older man's perspective. So somebody who is, in their 60s or so, they're having health issues. And I kind of sort of switch up forms here. So I do include recipes here. I include a section from the father's perspective, and then essentially include sections that are very long flashbacks to his growing up in Assam in Northeast India. Gordoy Torkari, 5 carambola, 1 green chili, 1 tablespoon mustard seeds, 1 teaspoon turmeric, 2 tablespoons oil, salt. 1. Chop carambola into strips. Mine's green chili. 2. Mix golden green chop and coat with turmeric. 3. In a vat, heat oil and fry mustard seeds until they pop. 4. Add carambola strips and chili. Be sure mustard seeds are spread throughout. 5. Add salt to taste. Serve hot. Pupen. One by one, this over sunny morning, the women come, perching on the edge of Jumi's cot, twisting a rag in water, mopping her warm face, and gazing at this hideout of brass jars filled with spears, framed tapestries of Buddhas, toppled Bollywood DVDs. But ladies that they are, they munch on nimkis and ask the usuals about Bollywood house. After my switch with Dorji, I'd fallen into a crevice from which I'd spy their parties. Which lady wore the most trussed-up mekhla, whose daughter had turned to drink, whose son had landed which Wall Street job. My own news, my own heart, they will spill to their men while folding silk pajamas, oiling their husband's back. Soy Kiara Bosta, they'll say in hushed tones that mean, don't let this happen to us. Pinky Ba, the oldest of the ladies, drives over late afternoon. She marches up the steps with her bulldog face, square tribal bones set in a villager's solid build, a corning dish of chicken soup in her hands. Like a Kamrupi, she peers right into my face. Who is the Laura? I walk to the living room window, its deluge of white light and empty cars as I mumble his parting words, and she shakes her head. How do their brains work? Must be what these Americans say. Money doesn't buy manners. I turn to Ba and, fist trembling, want to confess. I've dreamt of snapping every bone in his buttered body, stewing his entrails in a curry I'd serve his fancy friends. But it is Ba who turns away, kneeling in her bulky pink sweater by the DVDs strewn before the TV. You look like a ghost, Pupen. Go take a walk. I almost ask if she can stay the night, so I can muster the put-off drive for my EKG, so I can slow into this thing called sleep. But I kneel to alphabetize the familiar faces, Meena, Nutan, Vajantimala, and say, Baido, what will happen? What will I do if something happens? Bob brushes away my hand. With Manu coming in and out, you worry too much. Jua. So I make a list of things. Egg, bread, hak. I will eat if Jumi won't. And scarf my head into the ice streets. Oak Tree Road mills with families, about sari shops, dosa joints, the fragrant grocery. I wheel my cart among them, straight-backed Punjabis, lotus-eyed Saudis, the ceaseless chirp of Bengalis, and hear the oddest heartbeats, Gagan, Tarara, Jumima. I wheel about with the cart, its stiff wheels squeaking, the sole man, 111, listening, looking at this small aisle on this small road where I've landed. Plain green gourds that hacked would stink with orange sweetmeat, fuzzy fingers that boiled would melt into peppered okra soup. I wheel up and down aisle 1, selecting samosas, a coriander bunch, tamarind palms, along frayed linoleum aisles Dara never visited. Her perimeter had been our Castle Hill Avenue block, which she circled endlessly before collapsing on the sofa, before rewatching a Bollywood film. Too late, the bulbul sings. Everywhere, contented men shift beside careful women, so I turn into the jewelry aisle. But here, it is all mothers and daughters, a skinny salesgirl clucking about them like a hyper chicken. Oh, but this blue suits her skin. Oh, but gold is good luck. Oh, but you can't have too many bangles. No one glances at me, a short man in a loose coat, loafers scruffed up. No one bothers to ask, Sir, for whom are you shopping? No one circles and checks as I finger this set of pink glass bangles, that row of long brass chumkas, or drop extra goodies into an extra bag. Hadn't Jumi wept before such trinkets? Hadn't Walt played with them and her? No one notices as I lift my trinket bag alone, leaving the vegetables in the bangle bin. Even I don't quite notice as I wander to the exit with my trinkets. Beep, beep. Mothers and daughters, men and wives turn to me with their questioning frowns. Beep, beep, not for you. And I freeze, breath caught between the fake jewels in my plastic purse and the electrodes jammed inside my leaky heart. And the women smoke about me in a chattering, hand-wringing haze. And I sink, trinkets cascading out in a rainbow on the tiled floor. And I lie atop the gray linoleum, crinkling up into tiny hills, arms knotted, legs jerking, till only dark lips and ringed claws peck at my cheeks, my chest sinking beneath the snow, ospreys and larks and chickadees, but where, oh where, is my tongue? Atop a mound of slippery fat, blackening peel, marrow red bone, I hold my daughter. 12 still, just before she'd slink off into a mumbling adolescence. I couldn't translate. She flutters her eyes wide and grabs my chin. You have to speak, say something other than we're not good enough. But the vinegar of the mound, of the moaning around us, from mummies lashed to branches with rope, rushes into my nostrils, my throat. And when I grunt up on my elbows, my knees, to point and say, we're so close, Ma, Jumi rolls away as if in a playground game, bumpily down the mound. I dive in, swimming deep through the thicket of other people's fruit rinds and crumbling crusts. I wake on a stretcher in the back of a van. 2 boys pressing this glass tourniquet and pumping that rubber dial over my tingling arms, my fast chest. And it is not Jumi, but Dorji at my feet, stubble shadowing his slow smile. How are you feeling, Mr. S? The darker boy says, his hands deftly checking the circles pasted just under my collarbone. Bonnie is all I can breathe out, but who understands here? Are, Dorji says, slipping a plastic cup of water to my mouth. What is this fainting drama in public? You two are forgetting to eat now? I was shopping, I say, but voice whistling, it comes more like I was stopping. Do you have arrhythmia? The bulkier boy says, rolling up his sleeves to forearms tattooed with faces, pressing 2 fingers to my neck, my wrists, the sore between my ribs. Your friend here connected us with your doctor who said you were due for an EKG. He steps back, eyebrows raised and stethoscope paused in his left hand as if expecting an apology. Dorji pats my hands and shakes his head. It's a family syndrome, this fasting protest. His daughter is also stubborn. The thinner boy raises me slowly to a sit-up on the stretcher. You're better to her alive than dead. Am I right, Mr. S? They slip then, these strapping kids with smooth faces closeting their own reels, into snappy Spanish as they riffle through yellow pages on clipboards. Dorji laces my loafers and says, Yar, we aren't immortal anymore. We've become what they call it here, endangered species, which makes no sense, I want to scold him as he signs yellow papers and thanks the boys, who watch curiously as Dorji lifts my left leg, then my right, over the back rim of the van. It is all I can do to stand swaying against the brisk rush of wind, to hobble after Dorji between the van and his Corolla as he zooms, to breathe 1 in, 2 out, over the hilly highway, past the jagged smokestacks, the cluster of pink houses, round the forested side lane that opens up to manicured lawns. Except the lurid lights of a cop car swirl in Jumi's lot, by the corner of pink begonias, the snow-spotted sign, Peace Terrace. Pinky Bob, whose pink sweater is gone, yet dabs at sweat from the sides of her neck, turns from the 2 cops standing wide stance before their car. Poopin', she says, spinning, then waggles an arm pumps to Dorji and me. I called you so many times. Where is she, I say. Bob blinks rapidly and looks not at me but behind to Dorji. Pupen, my daughter called, she says rapidly. The babysitter had canceled. I was gone for just a moment. I don't wait for an ending. I skip step after Dorji to the rumpled mound of sheets, Gordoy uncut and untouched on the plate, so that there are no clues, not one. So the next story that I'm going to read, and this is the most experimental piece in the collection, BX Blues, a Dance Manual for Heartbreak. This is actually the story that took me the longest to write. So it took several years. I think part of what broke this story open was that I decided to mix genres here, and so I was experimenting with the palimpsest. I basically kind of rewriting the sort of Hindu scriptures or mythology that I grew up with, and then mixing it with kind of dance instructions. And I will read from, and I'm experimenting with second person here. So this ended up being my favorite story in the collection, and I don't think it's just because it took so long to revise. Stop 2. So this is a train story. It's a train going up from Manhattan to the Bronx. Stop 2. Biju, do you remember the afternoon I lost you? It rained the way it does today, slanted torrents erasing everything till the clouds breathed 5, 4, 3, and I shielded your fuzzy sleeping head on my shoulder. Boys with their puffy coats and unfettered manes hung by the closest pole, commenting on your milky rose, your delicate wrists. I'd marry her for her cheeks, they conferred. I shook you, hours stopped. But when I dashed out the doors, you rose frantic-eyed. The train slipped off, your palms pressed to the glass. I laughed and waited till you rode back. Your cards, when you ran onto the platform and showed me, had disintegrated into blue scraps. I could only make out 2 equations. E equals mc squared and F equals ma. Energy and force, you said woefully, are the only things that made it. Look how, Biju, a decade later, I've discovered a third. E plus F equals L, a hidden love, brash and raw and too blue to bury. How we are all the wild childs of the city, train riding some afternoons, crush jumping in the dark, with our frank glances, our sweet rumps, springs when merengue jiggles on car after car of tank tops and shorts, summers when we have to bust a hydrant to cool the roads down. All the goosebumpy nights we whisper, yo, mommy, hi, ma, hey, Punti, ki khabor Biju, come home, okay? Gulma. God becomes a tortoise in the very first race. The gods and demons had made a truce, all to churn up the nectar of immortality from the ocean of milk. But the mountain they turned into a churning staff began to sink. So God morphed his back into a dappled bowl, his ancient face you can't help but love, rolling its eyes like, I can't believe I have to save these kids from themselves. The gods and demons went back to pulling each end of a snake, the mountain rebirthing the foaming pot of nectar, so that each side rushed at a taste of forever. Here's the part they never tell you. God had to shapeshift again into the jewel-eyed, honey-pussied Mohini to lure the demons away from the other nectar and into Shiva, the destroyer, who had to drink up the poison that also poured forth. His was the first throat to turn blue. Even then, God couldn't stop one demon from swallowing immortality. And though he cut the demon's head, the head lives, every now and then swallowing the sun. Dance Act 2. Shadowbox power players across the back screen. Let rise a mountain, let sink the mountain. A snake's wriggle darkening the screen, the stage, the audience. At such a moment, you, Biju, and Maina stayed together, from the back wing to center stage to front wing, in that simple 4-step. Your hands too are basic, palms still overlapping, but thumbs hidden. swimming, sliding as shelled creatures do. But once at the front, you must split shift as God does. Biju, you face front right and become Mohini the temptress. Cocking your hip, resting mudrad hand to your ample bum, cupping your back head with an arched, suggestive arm to distract the bad boys. Maina, you face front right and become blue-throated Shiva, kneeling and cupping your palms to catch the poison, tipping back your face to the eclipsing moon to drink in death, to save immortality for the good kids before the lights go out. Stop 3. Don't say names or smell Old Spice mixed with sweat or watch that brassy face sit before you, conjuring him up. The city's haunted by jawlines that slope like his, by crisp white shirts unbuttoned at the top, by hands dangling from overhead holds with the same given grace. Today's twin smiles at you. Above his head, the ticker line flashes, 12:20, and you think, deja vu means riding with ghosts. The afternoon your long-gone man sat by you, he said, it's warmer over here. A window's open, you said, measuring the bangs that slanted his brow. Van Gogh's weed is what you saw, not his toothpaste smile that meant untried youth, his rum and coke breath that meant bachelor ways. Art was the problem. You had to find muscle under the skin, see if yes, those anatomy lessons were right. Lie down and he'll bend his spine. Arch your neck and he'll tilt his skull. Grip his shoulder and he'll hold your waist, playing his finger bones over all the tones of you. Art was shit. In a painting, the subject never moved, but a human being could walk in and out the frame of your days. Art never told you. One evening while drinking soup, he'd say, I'm tired, this isn't working, let's be friends. Truth is, only art stays. You painted your long-gone's face on a pale blue tile and cemented it hard smack at the center right of your mosaic. Boraha. This might be the least flattering avatar of all, God the wild white boar. Oh, he was beautiful even then. But the plot twist begs the question, does God save some at the expense of others, all for himself? He turned into a long-tusked boar with shiny white spindles when Hiranyaksha, an immortal human, gathered the ball of earth under his bicep crook and dove to the bottom of the unbreathable sea. The arrogant kid was looking to pick a fight with Vishnu, God's preserver form, who was the only one stronger than him. So God the boar wrestled with the kid for 1,000 years, and after slicing the kid's head with his disc, lifted the earth like a dark pearl on his glistening tusk. Thing was, Hiranyaksha had only ever become human because he had once been God's godly bodyguard, and on duty had blocked 4 other gods from bothering his master's sleep. Those gods had cursed Hiranyaksha to human life, but promised when an apologetic Vishnu awoke, Hiranyaksha would be relieved when Hiranyaksha met his death at God's hands. You tell me, what kind of reward is death for a duty done? How come Hiranyaksha never was reborn when he lost his only home? How come for us to live, Hiranyaksha had to die? All right, so I'm gonna close out with some new writing. This stuff is definitely not as kind of shaped yet or polished as the fiction, but I do just kind of want to, and it's going to be just several minutes, and then I'll turn it over to Q&A hopefully. I just wanted to say that kind of introduce the working project I have now. It's an experimental travel memoir that was inspired by a cousin, my cousin Ranjit Das, who I call Rubal Dada, our older brother Rubal. He died suddenly several years ago, and so I had to go to Assam for his last funeral rites. And it was really a shock for me because he was only a year older than I was, and so nobody expected him. This was when we were both in our 30s. Nobody expected him to die, or to die the way he did in this sort of mysterious way. And the last time I had seen him was several years before, when I had a year fellowship traveling through Northeast India, and he had traveled for a lot of that year with me because I learned very early on that it was really risky as a single young woman to travel in that area. So right now I'm conceptualizing this experimental travel as a kind of textual home or house for people that I feel experience second-class citizenship in the nation state. So, it's imagined as a kind of Asian American travel memoir where, that from my vantage point, it would be minoritized subjects in the US, specifically Asian Americans. And then in India, it would be people from Northeast India who are indigenous or tribal primarily and primarily low caste. And so I'm imagining, there to be 14 chapters, and each chapter represents a kind of room in this textual home. And I'm going to read from, and every chapter has a title that is the room, but it has a subtitle that's the theme. So I'm going to read from the room called The Courtyard, and the subtitle is A Man Named Victorious, which was the actual translation of my cousin's first name. And this is written as a lyric essay, so it's written in fragments. The section that I'm reading from is called Destiny, and I'm just going to read numbers 3 and 4. Sunny afternoons, my cousin's widow, Onabo, bathed their son Baba in the courtyard. She put out a tie-dye colored plastic bin and washed him in the clear sun. A somber baby who hardly made a peep, he livened up at this excursion, splashing his paws in the water, blinking the large dark eyes that were my cousin's. Onabo seemed easier in these moments too, smiling once in a while, waving at me to come closer, snap a pic. I had taken many pics 9 years earlier of Runumaba's son, the first baby born to my 4 Mirza cousins. I was the one with the pentax, the nebulous aim of writing about Northeast India. And here he was, this lotus-eyed babe as round as a frog, as prized as life. So I'd shot him, Baba then too, as the Assamese call their baby boys, as my cousin had always been called by his family. Taking his first bath, in his naming ceremony, watching his first bihu, that dance of our new year. Pindo, my brother-in-law, stood patiently in so many of these pics, eyes shining as he held up his son. But in these new photos, my cousin was the ghost, the one who should have been there, instead of his widow with her pink eyes, his brothers with their grave faces, my uncle with his sudden gaunt frame. The other 3 boys felt it too, though only the oldest, the Baba of 9 years before, understood. Mintu Dada's 9-year-old son was the chatty one who had taken a liking to me, bringing me back half his school lunch, visiting me in my room to try my fingerless gloves, my lotion, my comb. He was the one who leaned over the baby's crib and declared, "Your father's not coming back. Did you know that?" Till my cousin scolded him away. The other boy, only 2, looked like a Kosari with his tipped eyes and moon face, and unfortunately acted like the tribal stereotype. Whatever you wanted to call it, naughtiness or daring, he ran everywhere, tumbling down those steps, wailing over egg-sized lumps before he tried climbing out a window or swashbuckling a knife longer than he was. But my sister-in-laws loved those babies so hard, never spanking them, hugging them as if that would help them breathe, letting them run free, free, free. The rare time they put the Kosari in the bamboo crib in the courtyard, he screamed as if his life depended on it, and I joked that he was crying, "Azadi, mujhe azadi chahiye," freedom, I want freedom. Which made me wonder, glancing at the bedroom where either Onabo or Baba would cry, can you love someone hard enough for 2? Would Baba learn to stay quiet or to scream? Would he always be different? And did he already sense why? The only origin story that became clear was this. My cousin's home name, ruble, had been given by my communist uncle after the Russian currency. That when Ruble Dada had been born, my uncle had been hopeful in an India about as old and independent as my cousin would be when he died in it. 4. On a 2003 bus ride out from Majuli, once the world's largest river island, I sat beside an Assamese man who asked me about my trip. I told the stranger about visiting a missing village, about going into a sangkor, a traditional tribal house built on sticks above the river, about bargaining for hand-woven shawls, about photographing 2 missing women, one young and beautiful, the older one's defined cheekbones and nut-brown skin reminding me of my grandmother's face. "What do you think?" the stranger asked. "Aren't they pigs?" I started at his bluntness, even though I expected this in India. But still, really? "Their homes are cleaner than in Guwahati's," I said. He squinted at me, the way I'd sometimes seen Upper Assamese or general assholes do, and I flipped the script. Traitor, which I'd heard. Gosari, which I'd also heard. What is important now about that conversation is how the next time I'd see a sangkor, it would be to honor a more dire crossing. My sister-in-laws wanted to commission for me a metalwork picture of a sangkor, but carrying that memory felt impossible. Rubal Dada and I had sat together in the Majuli Sangkor's shaded bedroom over a delicate floor through which we could see the hungry river. He had sat haggling with the missing boy who'd brought us there, while I'd nagged Rubal Dada to leave it alone, to let them take whatever price they could get. Even this one flash of firmness from my cousin seemed funny. He who had mocked things more than usual on that first river crossing. He had mocked our auto rickshaw driver who, when the rickety auto chortled to a stop, knelt on the ground and prayed to the auto god. He had mocked the sinuous bamboo bridge that was the only visible way to cross a sudden tributary flanked by heavy trees. We stood, me, my cousin, his loud friend, gazing out at this exquisite antiquity. "Let's go," I said, setting a foot on that bridge. "Bye," my cousin said cheerily. "And when you fall into the middle of that water, I'll be standing here waving. Bye." He mocked the Hotra members who woke every chilly morning at 6 to bathe in icy water. "No heating," he announced to me that first morning. "Wake up and experience the authentic Assam." When I made a face and mumbled, "I'd rather wait," he pinched his nose and said, "Oh, ho, ho, you want everyone to be saying, 'Who is that pretty stinky girl?'" But he didn't mock me. When on the way back, we ran into a Spanish couple who could speak neither English nor a single Indian language, but whose navigational phrase was, "I love India." Good enough for my cousin who grinned, "Yeah," gave a thumbs up and said, "We love India too." So I spoke slowly in Portuguese to this couple who spoke slowly in Spanish. We spoke about Vaishnav Hinduism's founder, Honkardev. We spoke about how Indians picked up quickly on foreigners, but differently. For the blonde, blue-eyed Spaniard, he'd been touched and questioned, the object of fascination. For his brunette girlfriend, she'd been shepherding them like a determined pilgrim through this other holy land. For me, who got derided on the street by boys who called me an Assamese pretending to be an American till I opened my mouth. We spoke about New Year's rituals, how the Spanish put 12 grapes in their mouths for each midnight stroke, how the Assamese celebrated by another calendar entirely in the spring and for a whole month, but burned tall huts and ate pitas for January's Magh Bihu. The whole time, my cousin, who spoke Assamese, English, Hindi, and other Indian languages, but not these European ones, watched me with his eyes shining. But it is my cousin's crossing not to that eroding island, but away from it, that has made me feel most unexpectedly the Portuguese word saudade. How you can miss something with deep blueness. How you can learn only in missing how much you loved. So that months later, you will be driving in sunny San Diego, and suddenly, for the long pause of a red light, you weep, the water your cousin threatened washing your face. that was a whole slew of stuff. So any questions of any kind?
Yeah, thank you so much for reading. That was amazing. Yeah, I had a question about the EX Blues story. How did you discover the alternating forms for that story?
You mean the different genres?
Yeah, like how it went from the dance instructions back to the mythical, mythological sort of same structure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of what happened was, so that was a story that was one of the, the first half of the book, a thesis story. I was just experimenting with doing second person. But then, I think just emotionally what the story was talking about, which is the sort of alienation between the two sister characters, was too difficult for me at that point to really kind of work through and revise. And then I ended up taking a cross-genre experimental class with Anna Joy Springer in UC San Diego, where her argument basically was sometimes the sort of emotional truths of our stories are not available in one genre, like literary realism, and sometimes it's really moving into other genres. And for me, it was dance. Partly, I wanted to experiment with that because I felt like I'd grown up dancing, and I felt like when a lot of people are unable to speak some kind of emotional truth, it comes out in the body. And so I really just sort of went back to the body with that and tried to write in dance genre in some way. And one of the dance genres that I had really learned that I think kind of got indoctrinated through the body was kind of religious dance forms initially. And so I think doing that just cracked the story open emotionally, and that was really just the process for it. Yeah.
In the introduction, it was talked about your style and kind of things you like to write about. For people who are trying to still find that in themselves as writers, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I wish I had asked that question when I was a younger writer. And I'll say that the breakthrough for me that came was a story that I wrote my first year in my MA program when a teacher said, stop writing kind of the story that you think, you think people want to hear or that the journals want. Just write one true sentence for you, and then write another true sentence after that. And when I did that, the story that came out was the draft for the opening story in the collection, The Ruins, which I didn't read from today, but it was the first story I published out of the program. And so I think the other part of my answer is, like, when you do that, I think what happens is you kind of discover like who you really are on the page, and it can be a scary discovery, because I discovered that my stories were really dark, they were really violent, they were thinking about sexuality, they were kind of working through stuff that, I had not had a kind of space or tools to work through growing up as I did, the child of immigrants in the Bronx. So I think when you write a true sentence and you're really committed to that, and then you're unafraid to kind of accept what comes out, and your material kind of arrives. Any other questions? It can be really basic too. I know that some of the stuff is probably very unfamiliar to people. Yeah.
For your travel memoir, are you working primarily from memory, or are you referencing like any journals that you were keeping?
I did keep a lot of notes as a kind of, I was like sort of a fledgling researcher, but I think because it's memoir, the notes never became anything. I took that fellowship in 2003 to 2004, and then the writing emerged in 2012. A little bit after that, I started wanting to write about my cousin. So again, it was really coming from an emotional place. The notes are like really pretty useless now. I think like what happened was that I was learning how to differentiate between what was accurate history for the region and what was inaccurate, which in Northeast India and many other places is really obscured by sort of colonial practices around the archive and narratives we receive versus like what we discover to be true. So yeah, I mean, that's a little bit kind of a left field, but it's to say that like I do think that shapes my memoir, because I do think memoir has a bar for truthiness, right, that fiction doesn't in the same way. So I don't think the research was wasted, but yeah, the writing didn't come from that place. So. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I've just been wondering this. How many languages do you speak? From Portuguese and like all sorts of different Indian languages. And how does, if we want to tie into writing, how does that kind of play with your writing?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. I mean, I don't think I really speak too many languages, like very well. I mean, I can definitely claim English. I think I learned Assamese like very early on because that was like the language that was spoken in the house. And then I took Portuguese as like the language I learned like in school. But I grew up with like, you know, I mean, I grew up in the Bronx, and so I grew up with a lot of Spanish around me. In the public schools in New York at the time, you had to learn Spanish, which I think was a wonderful requirement. And then, you know, I just grew up watching a lot of, you know, my life is very bifurcated. So I had like American life outside of the house, which was English and Spanish. And then I had inside the house Assamese and then Bollywood movies, right, which was Hindi. So I kind of, you know, I would say I'm like, you know, semi-conversational in Spanish and Hindi, and then my fluency is in the other three languages. But in India, you know, like people tend to usually speak at least 2 or 3 different languages just because it's so like, you know, there's so many different kinds of hundreds of languages there. So, you know, I think this is similar in Europe and, you know, probably other places too. It's not, I don't think it's really a reflection of like expertise in any way. It's more like that's just what happened in life. And in terms of like the way I treat it in my work, I just try to be, you know, go back to like, you know, the point I was giving, that great teacher's advice, just write one true sentence for you and then follow it up with another true sentence. I just write kind of, I think of a soundscape, you know, like what feels organic to the story I'm writing or to my memory or to my imagination of a place. And then I try to kind of reflect the soundscape of that. So I can't imagine writing about the Bronx, for example, without including Spanish in it. You know, I can't imagine writing about Northeast India without also kind of referencing, you know, the fact that Hindi is the kind of lingua franca there. It's not actually British English or even like the dominant language Assamese. So some of it's also about just paying attention to kind of the politics of the topic that I'm in place I'm writing about. So. Some other questions? Anything can be really basic.
Maybe we should just take one more round of applause.
Okay. Maybe we can talk.
Oh, if you want to get your book signed, I'm sure that people will be very happy.
I joked about this thing here. I'll pull my gas. My son, it's not planned. No, I didn't.
A guy set up the advertisement, and this was going at the bar. A few years ago. I mean, we're having open night at. So.
Well, didn't we used to do?
Like years ago.
No, I think he wasn't. No, that's okay.
Yeah.
I think so.
Was that the place we brought? No, that's it. Yeah, no, it was definitely like this one. Yeah.
No, I wasn't anybody. I got 2 seconds. That was the worst.
I was just like checking out the video and I was like, oh no, it's still going. Goodbye, everybody.